afternoon, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is Dog Nation's Recruiting Insider Jeff Sintel. We are wearing the same shirt today, which we own a lot of the same clothes, just given the fact we both work for Dog Nation. I think this may be the first time, though, we've actually worn the same shirt as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, but we will do our part not to duplicate our opinions as part of today's show. We'll give you our own various slices of opinion, information when it comes to UGA recruiting. We'll have a good time over the course of the next hour doing that. I no doubt assume that when we get into our top targets coming up in just a little bit, potential movement with some of the guys on that list as we get ready to start high school seasons, by the way. Some big games in Georgia this weekend, big games around the country. Also, my guess is it'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I think we've done it. Maybe, what was the Step Brothers thing where people got onto us one time?
We were both wearing vests at one point in time, and I did walk over and kind of do the, over-the-shoulder pose that John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell made famous back in the movie.
I would be Will Ferrell, right? You would be John C. Reilly? I mean,
probably so. Yeah, you probably have earned Will Ferrell status there. I'm the bit player in this tandem.
No. I just kind of meant how, like, I don't know, personality, hair, tall. I don't know. That's what I was thinking.
I'm kidding.
It's good enough to be your stepbrother anyway, sir.
All right, so we are going to get through a lot in today's show. Later on, we'll hear from Cedric Van Pran Granger about his commitment to UGA, and that is what we're going with now. We're adding the name to Cedric's full name there.
Definitely. If everybody, as a reporter, I think the most humble things we can do is to personify the individuals we cover the way they would like us to. And when I mean the way they would like us to is if someone has a name, the most personal thing I think all of us have, Brandon, is our names. So I think if he wants to be known as Cedric Van Pran Granger, which is a tip of the cap or a big respect nod to his stepfather there, Cedric Granger. His dad's first name is also Cedric.
Okay.
Then that's the least we can do. And it was ironic, Brandon, with this recruiting story, maybe one of the final hurdles or one of the final green lights for him to go ahead and commit to Georgia was his dad said, son, I like this school. I want you to play for this man. I approve of it if you want to go play for Georgia.
So later on in today's show, we'll hear more about how Van Pran Granger came to choose the Georgia Bulldogs and what Sam Pittman's reaction to that was when Cedric delivered the good news over the course of the weekend. At least we all found out about the official announcement over the course of the weekend. That's coming up later on today on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. And as I said before, we'll get into top targets, the movings, the rumblings when it comes to those guys as well. But we want to begin today's show with a different offensive lineman. Let's look ahead to the class of 2021 for a moment. Amarius Mims, one of the biggest potential gets for anyone for that 2021 class, and a guy that Georgia has seemed to remain in really good position with. Now, Amarius has a tendency to tweet some stuff every now and then that's kind of interesting, but nonetheless, the overall bond, the relationship with he and UGA seems to be pretty strong, and in just a moment, he's going to go into a little bit more detail about why that's true.
Yeah, it's funny, Brandon. I know you look for nooks and crannies of worry about a lot of kids like this, but this is a kid from Georgia who grew up a diehard Roll Tide Roll fan, a diehard Alabama fan. Alabama's offered him. Alabama's recruiting him hard, and he's visited Alabama a lot. But right now, Alabama is still not his leader.
So Georgia apparently is. Mims tells us more about why as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Hope you enjoy the interview right now.
That Georgia's still your leader. Why is Georgia still the school that's just a little bit ahead of everybody right now?
It's because the influence they've had on me, they've been more around, I've been they've been more trying to get me down to their places, just basically I feel like they want me there more than any other schools do. So
have you thought about any sort of decision timeline or when you want to do it? You're gonna wait senior year, or what feels right to you right now? I mean, there's no pressure, you can decide when you want to, but do you have any idea when you might do it?
Yeah, I was thinking around early senior year.
I'm sure they've said be our first 2021, right?
Yes, sir.
What do you think you like best about Georgia right now?
I'll probably say the relationship I have with the coaches and everything. So I have a good relationship with Coach Pittman, especially. Every time I go down there, we just get closer and closer. So I'll probably say that.
You got a funny Sam Pittman story? What's your funniest Sam Pittman story?
Whew. It's so many. I can't even think of them right now. There's a lot of them.
We do our job well as media when we write about more than just offers and your recruiting. What do you want people to know about you? What are you like outside of this? I mean, this is still new to you. This is your first year playing tackle. You were tied in, and you're not going to be a dominator already. But what's this like trying to fill this shoes of? Oh man, this is the next big guy.
Well, I mean, it's more like I just got to take it day by day, and I just got to get better. So just constantly taking it all in, but just trying to get better each and every day.
How was your experience at the cookout? Did you play the frisbee toss, or did you do the beanbags, or what did you do?
I did the water slide, and I did the golf. I did the golf thing, the putting at the end. So.
What was it like on the water slide with you all 6 feet 7 inches and 315 pounds?
Oh man! At first I didn't want to get up there. Then Coach Mark kind of convinced me. I was like, okay, I'll just get up there.
Is the way they build offensive linemen, is that attractive to you?
Yes, sir. I mean, I just like it's kind of unique. Like when I go and I see Ben Cleveland like 340, 6'7", and got a 6-pack, I'm like, that's kind of cool right there. Like I'm trying to be like that.
So you met your dad. Your dad played college football. He played in the Arena League. He played for Georgia Force.
Yes, sir.
Has he helped you along the way? I mean, I can see where the genes come from.
Yes, sir.
You've got some of that football player DNA in you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he helped me a lot. Like he's been there all my life and everything. Like taught me everything about football. But it's just, yes, sir. He taught me a lot. So.
What is Kirby's message to you? Has he talked to you yet? What does he say?
First, they want me the first 2021 commit. So. It's like the same thing over and over again. So,
what are you looking for in a school? Like, what do you need to figure out where this one's going to be the best one? What are you looking for?
So I think this is really interesting to get a chance to hear from Mims here. That's one of those guys that, and we've said this before, while Georgia is not currently holding a public commit for its 2021 class, it has certainly made big strides with a guy like Mims. You can talk about other offensive linemen as well that Sam Pittman seems to be in a good position with. There are these rumblings from fans on social media that maybe Georgia is also in a good spot right now with 2021 5-star quarterback Caleb Williams. So, Jeff, you certainly get the impression from hearing from Amarius Mims right there that while Georgia doesn't yet hold a commitment, it certainly holds a lot of cards when it comes to potential commitments from some of the best guys in that 2021 class.
Yeah, if you listen closely to that interview, man, it seems like Kirby Smart is already recruiting Amarius Mims a little bit because he was at the cookout and there was that big water slide and all 6'7" and 315 pounds. He was like, nah, coach, I'm all right. And then Kirby gets on there and says, come on, don't let the old man be the only one doing this. And there you go, Marius Mims slip and sliding across the practice fields, the Woodruff practice fields at the University of Georgia. A couple scouting things I want you to know about him. It was in the end of that piece, but Brandon, I don't know if I've covered a lot of dudes that are the number where their shoe size is larger than their age, and that's the case with Amarius Mims. 16 on the age. He won't be 17 until October, and yet his shoe size is already 17. Now, things to know about him.
How are you going to find a 17 shoe?
Especially
you
in
got to go to
Cochran,
Walters
Georgia.
in downtown Atlanta to get some of those, don't you?
Cochran, a special order for the Royals.
Yeah.
It's nice to cover a recruit that's in the purple and the gold. We don't see a lot of that now. Things to know about Amarius. First of all, played a lot of tight end last year, almost exclusively tight end last year. So if you're looking at that film and that B-roll that we got of him from a Jamboree game last Friday night, it's a little raw because he hadn't figured it all out yet. This is his first year as an offensive tackle, and he's a left tackle for Bleckley. Now, get this, small world out of small worlds. The offensive line coach there at Bleckley County used to coach at Brunswick High School.
Okay.
He coached Warren McClendon. He coached Deontay Demery when those guys were coming up in that program.
There you go.
I asked him the natural question. I said, okay, shelf, upside, ceiling of all these guys. He says it's clearly Amarius Mims. Good bender, already very, very, very raw still, but already knows, body control, things like that. He's starting to pick things up intuitively, keeps his feet really well, and Brandon, he's 6'7.5", maybe 315 pounds, and he looks like that. Bright future, and everybody wants to start thinking about tackles for Georgia 2021. The list right there starts with Marius Mims and then Micah Morris.
So credit to me, and I don't typically give away free advertising here, but I mentioned before about going to Walters in downtown Atlanta to get some tennis shoes. Sharonda Taylor said, you better believe it, my son's a 16 to a 16.5. That's where you got to go.
Are you getting some free shoes out of
No, listen, this is not an advertisement. I just know where you got to go when you get the big feet. Because, I got a pretty good size shoe. I'm a 12. But if you're a 17, or as Sharonda says, 16.5, that's like a whole half a shoe bigger, isn't it?
Now, if we had a camera, like we have the camera always inside behind the glass for Connor, I bet if we had a camera on Brandon's desk right now, there'd be like 4 or 5 stacks of Gators in size 12, because my man does not give away free plugs.
Yeah, no, listen, not one bit whatsoever. But I will tell you about this, though. Before we do top targets, take a look at some of the 2020 prospects making news around UGA right now. Let me remind you that if you're anywhere around the Atlanta area tomorrow, we've got a big event at the Kroger Marketplace incoming. You hear me talk about Kroger all the time here in this program. Well, tomorrow, starting at 6 p.m., here's the address. Please write this down. 5550 Bethelview Road. It's 5550 Bethelview Road incoming. We're going to be there tomorrow night starting at 6 p.m. Myself, Jeff Santel. If you read Mike Griffith at DogNation.com, Jeff mentioned Connor Raleigh before. He's going to be there. The entire Dog Nation team really on hand and in person talking about the expectations for the upcoming season. Please come by and see us tomorrow at the beautiful Kroger Marketplace. If you're watching on video right now, you can see what it looked like last year. It's going to be just that much fun, even bigger tomorrow. There's a Crow Bar, which is a bar inside of a Kroger. That's kind of a clever play on words with the name. That's going to be our home tomorrow night. So you have yourself a beer, cocktail, wine, whatever. Do a little shopping, but hang out with us starting at 6 p.m. as we talk about all kinds of fun stuff and big movement for Georgia on the field this season, why it could be the year the Dogs go all the way. We will do that tomorrow. Kroger Marketplace incoming, 5550 Bethelview Road as a part of our Kroger Kickoff. Jeff, I know you are just as excited as I am about being there with all of the folks who come out tomorrow night.
Not going to wear a red shirt tomorrow. I don't know. So
we'll be indifferent. I'll probably be dressed exactly as I am in that video, to be completely honest with you. But we will not both be wearing the same shirt tomorrow.
So I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to not try to overcook this or whatever, or sensationalize this. But Brandon, if Guinness was there, was that the best season kickoff show for a SEC defending championship team inside a bar, inside a grocery store in the state of Georgia in world history?
Yeah, we set records last year, and it's going to be even bigger this year. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Kroger Marketplace incoming, 5550 Bethelview Road. I keep saying the address because there are a couple of Krogers there in that area. The one you want to be at is the big Kroger Marketplace. Beautiful facility, essentially brand new, 5550 Bethelview Road in Kroger. That's the place you want to be. Can't wait to see you there tomorrow night. Kevin Lee says, going to have curriculum tonight. Wish he could be there. Will you be streaming it? Yes, Kevin, we will have a live video tomorrow night, so you can kind of check in on some of the stuff that's ongoing with that. With all of that said, let me also turn our attention now to what's happening with the 2020 class. In fact, let's take a moment to check in on top targets for the class of 2020. Name number one, who's been at the top of this list now for quite some time, is the 5-star cornerback Keely Ringo. He remains at the top. Anything new with Ringo, who seems content to follow a pretty traditional recruiting calendar? Anything you want to provide by way of update about Mr. Ringo?
Season's about to start out in Arizona. As much as I love a good joke and to get a chortle or something out of Brandon, him and I go back and forth about where someone's ranked and where's not ranked. I thought for a second if it would be entertainment value to move him up to number one.
Are you kidding me off the top?
Keely Ringo is so good and is such a fantastic football player that I can't do that even for pure entertainment value.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting to see. Now, who is the he that Jeff references in that statement? We may find out as these top targets move on about the temptation to potentially rank someone else as a top target for the class of 2020. But for now, Ringo remains that guy, uncommitted at least publicly, but many Georgia fans feel pretty good about Ringo in terms of how this could go. How might things change with some of the other guys on this list? Let's talk about that right now. Looking at name number 2 in our top targets for the class of 2020. We do see Noah Sewell here at number 2, and this is an important update I want you to provide for us because a lot of social media chatter as of late about the fact that Sewell is dealing with an injury. Is this the kind of injury that's going to keep him off the field for the entirety of his senior season? How serious is the injury that we've heard about for Sewell? Give us an update on that.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Noah, who got another 5-star rating recently from Rivals.com, he suffered some sort of injury to his foot. He was in a walking boot. I was actually planning to go out there and cover his game in Las Vegas. That was really tough duty there. When they played Bishop Gorman, that was Tate Martell's old school. But I've been told that Sewell's going to be on the shelf for a while, not for the whole season.
Okay, good to hear.
But at least for the next couple of weeks as he tries to get right with everything there. His school, Orem, out in Utah. A lot of people confuse some of the times when he wears like the dog tag and some gear, because they have the same O as the Oregon O.
Yeah, good point.
But Orem High School in Utah, kind of going to watch one of the nation's elite best players I'm going to watch him on the sidelines for a few weeks.
Okay, so there's that. Does Georgia just have bad injury luck with recruits, or does everybody have a bunch of injury recruits? Because it feels like we're always talking about recruiting injuries for Georgia. 2 linebackers last year, running back in 2018. Fields isn't on the Georgia roster anymore, but his senior season came to an end. Does Georgia over-index on injured recruits, or does it just seem that way?
I think it seems that way because you look every year, Georgia has about 20, 25 guys that are usually committed or on the way by this point of the season. And odds have it, Brandon, that one or two out of every 20 high school football players are probably going to be dealing with an injury.
Drew Roman says that he believes that Sewell's going to go to Oregon. I think if that were a done deal, though, Sewell could have committed to Oregon anytime he wanted to because his brother's currently there right now. That family's already got a strong relationship there with the Ducks. The fact that he's taking the official visit to UGA, the fact that, Gabriel Sewell, Noah's father, has been as resolute and clear with you about Noah's interest in UGA, that leads me to believe that Georgia's absolutely in it for Sewell. Now, I can't tell you what's going to turn out to be the deciding factor and where Sewell's going to go, but this idea this is a recruitment that Georgia can't win, we've had too much movement in Georgia's direction for this to be one that's just destined to work out the way that a lot of people would have assumed it would have all the way along.
Yeah, and maybe I could tell you a few things, but I won't. But here's what I will say is that Noah Sewell, I just don't get the Oregon things, man. That would be almost like people thinking that B.J. Ojolari has to go to Georgia because Azeez Ojolari is there. Oregon, let's face it, folks, Beaverton is still 800 miles from where he lives in Utah. It's not like it's the...
Or even Eugene, where the Oregon campus is located.
Yeah, Beaverton is where the Nike campus is located.
I'm playing.
Yeah.
I'm just
Hey, he used to be a geography teacher way back when. Eugene, Oregon. Excuse me. But, that's kind of like...
Jeff's got the old opening in his mind.
I do. I think of the opening in, Nike School, Oregon. But the thing to consider here is, basically... That's 500, 600, 700 miles away, and that's not an easy trip whatsoever. His brother, that's potentially a top 10 tackle, as highly regarded as Andrew Thomas is by NFL scouts.
Yeah, like a legit first-round prospect along the offensive line.
He's only got one more season after this, so is he going to make the decision to go play with his brother for 1 year, or is he going to make the best decision for him and his football future for 3 or 4 years?
We shall find out. Name number 3, top targets for the class of 2020. And Yulia Ursal in our Facebook comment section said, when y'all going to get to Zachary Evans? Well, now we're doing it. We're talking about the 5-star running back, and I'm assuming you said before when you flirted with putting somebody different at the top of the top targets list, was it Evans indeed that you were flirting with here? And obviously he hasn't gotten any better as a player over the course of the last week, but sometimes you make these movements on the basis of improved positioning with the player and his viewpoint about Georgia. What do you want to say about Evans then here?
Well, I kind of thought Sewell and Evans a little bit there because, you like to, on your board, you like to have Sewell down a little bit. But then I guess the name of the day or the name of the week or the name of the month right now left for Georgia recruiting would be Zachary Evans.
Where's this coming from?
Sources, online chatter, the ones that you like to talk about.
I love them all.
I think it probably even hit Instagram late last night. And the one thing you know about covering recruits is when they have a surprise announcement coming and then someone spoils their surprise, well, then they're not going to make that announcement at that time. Folks, Zachary Evans, tremendous prospect. Would not surprise me anything he does in his recruiting. Would not surprise me if he makes a decision before the beginning of football season. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he makes a decision relatively soon. But as we say a lot of times, and I'm going to use a Brandonism right now, don't get too far ahead of your skis on this recruitment right now. I think whatever decision he makes, whatever school he chooses to commit to, you got to look at that as a good thing because right now he's got the vibe and he's seen enough out of that school. If he declares somebody this month, then that's the team to beat, and everybody wants to be in that position with Zach Evans.
Boy, everybody's talking about Evans right now. Van Bird, good to see him back in the comments section, says, when's he going to commit to the G? Van's obviously feeling pretty good about this. Chris Branham says that he thinks the commitment for Evans to UGA is, quote, imminent, that it's on its way there, that this may indeed happen. I even had somebody on our Dog Nation Daily comment section earlier today said he thought that Evans would commit to Georgia and, quote, shut it down. I've been telling you this for a while that I don't believe there's any way that Evans is going to shut it down. Even if he said he was shutting it down, I have a tendency, while I always take recruits at their word, as an older guy here, I have a tendency to assume that the in-state school there, the Aggies in particular, won't allow him to shut it down. They're going to keep knocking on that door in the hopes of changing his mind. How do you respond to that? That there are some people who are are so out in front of the Evans thing here. They feel so confident. They feel like that Georgia may actually end the recruitment by gaining the commitment here as at any point in time that it might come.
I would say the term shut it down with Zachary Evans in any sort of imminent decision. I think you shut something down, but I think that might be his phone for the day or the phone for the night after he makes his call or makes that move. But you look at him, and some folks in the Dog Nation Forum have been really active on the Evans front. They've got their specific signature gifts out, kind of proclaiming what they think's on the way. I did like a new term. I'm a word guy. Somebody came up with a new term for this news or frenzy. They called it a comimminent decision. Instead of imminent, they're combining, they're kind of mashing up commitment and imminent. And are things comimminent right now with Zachary Evans?
So Hugh on YouTube says, why does BA not trust Evans' word? His recruitment has been drama-free thus far. I think the Evans part of this has been drama-free. For the most part, Evans just likes playing football. He's not one of these guys that's contributing this drama. Y'all, they're paying Jimbo Fisher $7.5 million in College Station. They're not going to pay him that money to watch an in-state running back from 100 or so miles away in Houston leave for Georgia without a fine. That doesn't mean that I believe that A&M wins this commitment. If you force me to make a binary, crystal ball style pick, I reckon Georgia would be the school that I picked. But this is different than Kendall Milton in California right now, where a lot of those Pac-12 schools just don't have the recruiting chops to go out and get a guy like this. Helton's on his way out at USC. Chip Kelly has fallen on real hard times there in Westwood. There's not a California school right now that could have battled Georgia in-state for Kendall Milton. So it's a lot easier to say when Milton commits to Georgia, he's going to remain true to his word because he didn't even have a California school as one of his finalists. But the A&M situation is just different. They desperately need him. I think you always got to be careful when you're battling an in-state school that desperately needs a prospect. And as I said before, that doesn't mean that I don't think Evans is coming to Georgia, but this is different than Ringo, who most Georgia fans are confident about. This is different than the MJ Shermans and the Kendall Miltons of the world, who once they committed, most folks said, that's it, that's done, we'll see you in Athens. The Evans thing is just a more contested recruitment in my mind, but you're obviously the expert.
Well, you can tell when Brandon has certain feelings about a recruit because he breaks out into a little South Georgia on us. We got a reckon in there at the beginning of that diatribe where he says, I reckon, if you get a him and Hall in there, that'd have been great. But first of all, folks, look at those highlights. Those were against the highest classification in Texas high school football. Texas high school football is as big boy as it gets. He had 27 touchdowns last year. He averaged more than 10 yards per carry. Everybody's got Matthew Bowling fresh in their minds right now. If you had like a foot race or especially like a game of cat and mouse on the football field, and you put Georgia's fastest defensive back or even fastest defensive back recruit or target on the same field with Zachary Evans, I think he's at least 1 or 2 steps faster or quicker than most of those guys. Mm-hmm. He is about 1/10 of a second to 2/10 of a second faster in agility testing than the fastest players in the country. That's why he's special. I think the things that he wants to see in his recruitment, boy, he would sure like to see Grandma come visit him every Saturday. She's only about an hour away from College Station. But the main thing he wants to run behind a big offensive line. He wants to be paired up with another 5-star terrific tailback where they preserve the load. Georgia hadn't had a running back go over 20 carries in a game in 2 full seasons. And I think Georgia checks a lot of the boxes right there for Zachary Evans.
Let me give you one more thought on this, because this is an example of how my opinion on Evans has evolved a little bit. There was a while when I was a little skeptical of if he felt as strongly about being a part of a collection of great running backs the way that Kendall Milton did, because Milton's one of these guys that part of the reason why he became such a big deal, the recruiting trail, is because Milton was very open about his recruitment. Gave a lot of really good interviews, always gave thoughtful answers. And Milton, from the word go, and you first heard about him well over a year ago, good while ago, from the word go, he was always telling you, I love the idea of being a part, of depth at running back, heritage of Georgia, which has had a collection of really good running backs on campus at the same time. I didn't hear those words as much coming from Evans because he just doesn't say as many words, period. But all of a sudden now, and a lot of this is that kind of social media chatter, which may or may not prove to be true. But all of a sudden now, you do hear some things coming from that camp that lead you to believe, oh, maybe he's kind of in the same mold. Maybe he does like the idea of elite stable of running backs behind really big offensive line. He doesn't need to be promised, the world, 25 carries a game, first carry to start the first game of your college career. He doesn't need those kinds of promises, maybe. Maybe he is cut from the same cloth, a little bit more like Kendall Milton. We just didn't know that because he wasn't giving quite as many public interviews. That's kind of how my opinion has evolved on Evans over time.
Well, let me see what I can add with my insider-ish type information right here. Kendall and Zachary have been talking about playing together for a long time. This was year and a half ago. I think one of my first interviews with Kendall Milton was back in last February of 2018. And I know this, we were out there in Fresno covering his decision. We may or may not have had a big hand in putting together a commitment video. But there were 3 clear backs that Kendall Milton was working for Georgia at that time. And it was Zachary Evans, Tank Bigsby, and even Marshawn Lloyd. In my opinion, my clear opinion, without a doubt, the one that Kendall Milton wanted to play with the most was Zachary Evans.
I'm sorry. Dennis Wood says, I was expecting Jeff to not be in studio today. I thought he was Houston bound. Somebody. I mean, that's how much some of these people think this thing's about to happen.
We got families, guys. I mean, come on now. We got families.
But I mean, I wouldn't put it past you to show up there, and if you did, you wouldn't even tell me.
Boy,
you just call me on the phone from the it's not the 504, that's New Orleans.
332?
332, okay.
Wouldn't that be funny if I just joined the show from a remote today and we freaked everybody out?
You'd be like the vice president or something. I'm in a secret, undisclosed location. I like that. It's pretty good. So one of these days, maybe Jeff's just going to show up out of nowhere from Houston. That would be a very interesting thing to think about. So we'll keep talking about Evans, I'm sure, throughout the show. Let me look at a few of these other names, though, because people have got questions about other guys as well. Jordan Birch shows up here at number 4. Now, as excited as dog fans are about Evans, and as much as I'm a part of that same group, Birch is not that far behind on this list for me.
So Birch had a jamboree last Saturday. He's got another game this Saturday. You know what's funny? This is an intel bite probably just for Brandon only. You know, his head coach there at the Hammond School in Columbia, former Gamecock, played under Lou Holtz, former quarterback, now is head coach of the Hammond School. He also has a pretty solid podcast basically every week on the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Is that right?
I mean, it is no Brandon Adams production, but it's pretty good stuff. And you got a former player podcasting about South Carolina, and for the last couple of years.
How do you have time to do a podcast and coach a team?
Because Jordan Birch is your defensive line.
I guess that makes sense. You don't have to do as much defensive game planning if you've got him wreaking havoc off the edge.
He's like, we're good in the run front. We're good first down, second down, third down. He's also got another SEC defensive tackle in Alex Huntley.
Maybe I'll bring him on prior to the South Carolina game. We'll talk a little enemy intel with him then.
He's pretty good, and I've listened to his podcast for a while now, and it's good stuff, and it's from the perspective of a football coach, but also a former Gamecock player, and I'm sure Brandon will have no weird anxiety feelings about the head coach of Jordan Birch's high school team being a podcaster for South Carolina.
Yeah, no, listen, we've been down the road for a while. I mean, it's not easy to go into Columbia. I mean, everybody's got some sort of South Carolina connection there, and obviously Muschamp's son on that team there as well. So it's not easy. But I've told you before, if he was going to South Carolina, that's all anybody would be talking about, because you got every kind of connection with that high school that there is. The longer this thing goes, and the more that one stays semi-quiet, the better it works out for Georgia. Because if you're Jordan Birch living in Columbia and you're going to South Carolina, everybody in Columbia is talking about it. But put your ear to the ground, you don't hear a thing. And that to me is good news.
Well, here's something. Maybe I can give a little something here, Brandon.
Please, by all means.
Currently, in the nicest way possible, the Birch family, the Hammond Athletics Department, and the Hammond football team right now is declining all interview attempts and interview requests for this time. So, a little unique, especially for the nation's #1 overall player, especially for a private school that's likely loves publicity of this nature. might be a little bit telling about what's happening with this recruitment.
Oh, I think that is a very, very interesting thing to watch there. He's free to speak or not speak, but if he was going to South Carolina, he'd be telling everybody. All right, let's move on to the next name. 5-star tight end Darnell Washington out of Las Vegas. And, listen, for the most part, these are all the guys I would have up there near the top, maybe a slightly different order. Washington's one of those guys I continue to feel good about. What kind of national schedule? We were talking about this on Dog Nation Daily today, too. He doesn't go to Bishop Gorman, so that's the Las Vegas team that I think of playing the national schedule. What kind of competition is Washington be playing for senior year?
Well, nothing like what the level that a Bishop Gorman would or a nationally known program would. And you got Nevada football. Well, Nevada football kind of is what it is. That's why Bishop Gorman was always having to play St. John Bosco or Mater Dei or all those schools in California to get their national rankings up. But look at that play right there, guys. I hope you see this play right there. That's him as a punter for his Desert Pines high school team. Look for him to make his decision, and that's his signature recruit play right there, where he lines up as a 3 technique.
Nice.
Gets his hand on the ball, swats it down, changes hands, and flips it to a teammate. But
he's an athlete now. He's an athlete at a lot of different positions, for sure.
Yeah, there's another clip. Like, look at this one right here where they put it over. Look at these kids that try to take him down. And I say kids, these are grown men, but look at this. That's like an episode. That's like something out of Little Giants, Brandon.
Well, you see him catching the ball there, and this is one of the things I've said about a Rick Gilbert. I know more about him because he's from Marietta, but every time you see him in a big showcase opportunity, Gilbert's always making catches. He had more than 1,000 yards receiving last year, I think. Marietta's a very high level of Georgia high school football. Is Washington getting the same number of catches? Is this a guy that is used as much in the offense at his school as Gilbert is at his school? In other words, does he have the kind of quarterback that can deliver him the football? Does he have that kind of opportunity to go out and make catches on a weekly basis on Friday nights the way that Gilbert really does for Marietta? I mean, there's a lot of college prospects in that Marietta program, but Gilbert's not taking a backseat to anybody when it comes to getting catches there for the Blue Devils.
Well, I mean, look at what Washington's doing there. They've got him playing at defensive end. There he is making another tackle out on the edge. He's basically playing all over the place.
So no, then
no. And it's the funny thing. If we were talking about Gilbert right now, I'm sure he probably appears on this list at some point. But you want to talk about fantasy football. That would be like if you ever did a high school fantasy football league, that would be your first round pick at any position. Because Eric Gilbert's going to catch about 13 balls for 180 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns most nights, especially coming off the strong arm of Harrison Bailey. Darnell Washington, look for him to be in Sanford Stadium with basically the rest of the top 50 prospects in the country for the Notre Dame game. Likely that might be his official visit. Going to likely have all the tight ends in the country there that Georgia wants on the board. And we say this all the time. Georgia wants 2, and they would love to choose among their top 3 targets.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Let's move on to the next name. Top targets. A lot of folks weighing in on what's going on here. Elias Ricks. We did have some questions earlier about Ricks maybe falling down the board just a little bit. But you've been kind of out there in this Ricks thing for a while, and you still feel pretty good that he's at least among Ricks is at least considering Georgia, and obviously, Georgia would do what it could to make room for him.
Yeah, so you've got a guy here that, to me, it looks like a guy that could jump in right away and contend for snaps at Georgia or LSU in the nickel corner or star position. Definitely the money position as well. And he's at IMG Academy now, best friends, lifelong friends, solid, strong friend with Kendall Milton. And,
Dante Green, by the way, says he's been waiting to hear about Elias Ricks on today's show, so you're making him happy by talking about it here.
And look, he's always making these plays. Look at the length. Look at the separation, the way he glides. I mean, Elias Ricks was the nation's #1 corner for a time by the industry until he made his commitment on Christmas of last year. And I'm just going to say, just wait for it, folks. Wait for him to take a visit to Georgia. I think he'll get an official visit. He'll very likely be in the house for that Notre Dame game as well. I mean, man, it's getting to the point, Brandon, where if you're a top 50 recruit and you're not at that game, are you like, what's wrong with me? Do I need a new email address? Is the Wi-Fi working
my RSVP get lost in the mail?
Is the Wi-Fi working in mom's house or something like that? Because that one will be a ticket.
By the way, Wiley Foster says that Elias Ricks is his top target in the entire board.
Ooh.
Top
in the
target
entire
in the entire
board.
board, he says.
Over Keeley as well. That'd be some very interesting stuff right there.
Listen, you've talked up Keeley Ringo up to this point so much, and with good reason, that I'm still taking Ringo over Ricks with all due respect. I'd love to have Ricks as part of this 2020 class. Every Georgia fan, I believe, would. I'm still taking Ringo over Ricks.
So think of this, Brandon, from Tyson Campbell in 2018, and if a lot of the viewers and commenters have their druthers, then you can go from no 5-star corners to Tyson Campbell 1, Tyreek Stevenson 2, Keely Ringo 3, Elias Ricks 4. 4 5-star corners within 3 recruiting cycles, if that were to happen. Yeah. Oh, and then also throw in Jalen Kemper, who's the number 6 corner in the country as well. You know what, folks? I was having this discussion with somebody pretty smart the other day, and we were talking about, the marquee position recruiting for Georgia is definitely running back. Offensive line is kind of right on their heels a little bit. Third would have to be linebacker, especially when you put inside linebackers and outside linebackers together. But just you wait, folks.
Yeah.
The next one is going to be pretty hard when you look at tight ends, you look at cornerbacks and defensive backs. Like, everybody likes to throw out that DBU, but in the short-term memory of high school football prospects, which only go about 4 or 5 years, it seems like all the nation's elite DBs are starting to flock to Georgia.
Well, and what Georgia's going to have going for it in recruiting additional defensive backs is it can legitimately say, not only do we put guys in the NFL, but we develop you. You know, DeAndre Baker, 3-star coming out of high school. Eric Stokes, 3-star coming out of high school. Right now, Stokes looks like he's got an NFL future. Georgia's going to have a pretty big chip to throw into the table when it comes to defensive back recruiting because of the way that position is developed. And I can say from firsthand knowledge, seeing it with my own eyes, Kirby Smart is also very hands-on with defensive backs during practice. He's a very active coach on the practice field. This isn't Bear Bryant 100 years ago sitting up in a tower 500 feet in the air looking down on a practice field. You know, Kirby's putting his hands on you. He's getting involved during practice, and that's with defensive backs. Probably not a coincidence that that's the position group where you see a lot of guys really flourishing and developing. They're getting, Charlton Wharton's a fantastic position coach, but they're getting a lot of attention from Kirby Smart too.
So let's make a prop bet really fast. In an hour's worth of time, who talks more? Kirby Smart at a practice or you on a Dog Nation daily program?
Both of us use microphones. We have that in common. There's a chance he's got me on that one for sure. Let's look at the next name, our top targets for the class of 2020. We'll start rolling through some of these a little faster than we have others. So the only guy that gets an arrow is Theo Johnson. Is he the only guy that's moved? Or was that just left over from last week?
No, he's moved because we had somebody else at number 7 last week. You know,
so
we had Van Pran there last week.
Okay, yeah, so now he's off the board because he committed. So Theo Johnson, the Canadian tight end, there was that tweet from Todd Hartley this week, you know, super team stuff. LeBron James, Dwayne Wade standing there together. You know, you think tight ends coach, there you go. Tight ends coach tweets this out. Super teammates. Is he thinking about a big-time tight end tandem? What'd you make of all that, and how does it impact Theo Johnson here, who's obviously pulled in a lot of Big Ten-ish type directions?
Big Ten-ish type directions. Quick with that one, though. Big Ten-ish type directions.
But, I mean, if he doesn't go to Georgia, he's going to a Big Ten school, right?
Yeah. But the thinking is he's like, it hasn't changed. You know, Theo has been very open about what he wants to do. It's so close. It's hard for him to pick a leader. It's hard for him to pick a school. So he's going to feel a certain type of way, and then he's going to go into rapid fire visits, and he's going to let visit highs and lows and one-upsmanship from one visit compared to another kind of be the lead horse in his recruitment. It's going to be fun to watch with Theo as well, because I want to say this. I think the prospect that Theo feels he has a good of a relationship with Coach Todd Hartley at Georgia as anybody that's recruiting him, and those two talk a lot. And I would say that those two have been in more constant communication than Todd Hartley and the other two.
Jay Squillis on our Facebook comment section says that Theo is his top tight end on the entire board. So we've had a lot of really good opinions being brought in by a lot of our viewing audience here today. Jay Squillis says he'd take Theo over Darnell and Rick Gilbert. But did I just hear you say that Hartley's communicating with Theo more than he is with Darnell and Rick Gilbert right now?
I think that's just basically because one guy's a little bit more receptive to a lot of communication. One guy's a little on his phone more, easier to reach. You know, I'm sure Todd Hartley's going to try
to take that comment a few different ways.
I'm sure you can take. I'm sure you can take a look at a lot of things. But with Theo Johnson, let's keep the main thing the main thing. There's only one of those 3 top tight end targets that has a 40-inch vertical leap. That's Theo Johnson. There's only one of those guys that's probably going to run a 4.5 40 at some point this senior season, and that's Theo Johnson. There's only one of those guys that's the son of a former NFL player. That's Theo Johnson. And if we want to get in that conversation about at tight end, which one of those three is most likely to play quick or be the most polished tight end in the room, tight end only, I don't think Theo's finishing last in that group.
Let's keep it going here. Next name, top targets for the class of 2020. How about Zykevious Walker? He's been considered on the show for a while. We haven't seen Walker in the top 10. He was in the top 10 at one point in time, but he's back in now out of Slide County. What moves Walker up the board this much, or is this just an example of Gilbert moving out?
I think, well, here's what I'll say, Brandon. Look at that list, the top 10. This is probably the point of the year, point of the recruiting, where it's safe to say that I don't think Georgia's going to get all those guys on the top 10 list.
Sure.
Because let's look at the math. There's only literally 7 or 8 spots left at the most. When you look at Zykevious Walker, I think his evaluation will be interesting because Georgia has been up and down. There was probably a point, I'll be honest, I kind of thought that Zykevious Walker's decision would have been made by now. I think he was feeling a certain way about a lot of his schools.
Ro Hawkins says nice defensive lineman, he's a must-have.
This spring. And I think the thing that's changed with Zykevious is, last year's film, he was 250, 255, and everybody was thinking defensive end, outside linebacker, maybe. But now he's well over 270 pounds, and he's a senior. And when you're that big already, folks, you're going to be a defensive lineman. You're going to be an interior defensive lineman, most likely. So I think it's been a redial of the evaluation there a lot for one Zykevious Walker.
James Bryant says Walker is homegrown, so that alone throws some importance to him. Yeah, not a lot of Georgia commits from the state of Georgia. Walker would be an example of that. Next name, number 9 on our top targets of the class of 2020. Now you get to a Rick Gilbert out of Marietta, Georgia. And if I'm reading between the lines with you and our buddy Michael Carvel, our producer, always unhappy when Gilbert's name falls in this list. But if I'm reading between the lines from you, sounds like you think there's a better chance that Hartley's LeBron Wade tweet was more about an Evans-Milton pairing than it was a Darnell Washington-Theo Johnson pairing. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, you didn't hear me say that at all. I love how you can take a lot of these things a lot of different ways. You took it away from the tight end room and you put it towards the running back room with a lot of things like that. I'm going to say that Gilbert, nothing has changed with Gilbert since July. He had a huge news drop for us at the opening where he said, talking to some guys, going to visit Georgia for the Notre Dame game, wants to see a little bit more variety of routes, could make his decision in the month of September, needs to see some games first. The names are in there. Georgia's still in there. Alabama, I think, is really in there. Clemson is in there, and Tennessee is in there. I do think it was very telling that Gilbert, before the dead period, when it opened up and then when it closed again, Gilbert visited 2 schools, and those were Clemson and Alabama.
Do you think that Gilbert can play a wide receiver in college?
Exclusively wide receiver in college. I don't think that's the skill set for him.
Yeah.
I think
40 time, not that different from George Pickens, but 250 pounds is very big for a wide receiver.
He's a polished receiver.
He catches the ball a lot.
I firmly believe that almost everything Terrence Edwards has to share with the receiver has already been transplanted into Eric Gilbert's brain. He just has to rep it a little bit. The Jedi Master of receivers is teaching Gilbert everything he needs to know to play receiver. He's got good breaks. He can get himself open, create separation. He can go get a ball on anybody. He can force those safeties and DBs to come through him to get to the ball, which would be nigh impossible. But if he wants to be an exclusive wide receiver in college football, I don't think he is a top 15, top 25 pick in the NFL like he would be a tight end.
Let me see number 10 here in our top targets for the class of 2020. You get to Jervon Dexter, the Florida commit out of Lake Wales, Florida. Miles Sketsvold and Joel Moody essentially asked the same question. Are Zykevious Walker and Jervon Dexter fighting over the same scholarship right now?
No, I don't think so. I think scholarships would be allocated for Dexter no matter what.
But if Walker, Miles' question was a little bit different. If Walker comes, does that mean that somebody else that we talk about is now out?
You mean on the top targets list, or it could be
No,
somebody?
I mean on the actual list of guys coming to Athens to go to college.
Yeah, I would think. Well, you got to throw Cowan in there as well, and you got to throw Walker in there as well, and you got Dexter there as well. You got current commitments there as well, and I mean, folks, we're not going to break any hearts by saying this, but Georgia's going to sign the very best players they possibly can, and if one of their guys isn't the best player by the time signing day rolls around, and by the first 5 or 6 games of that senior film rolls around, those coaches owe it to the program and to themselves to bring in somebody that's just as good or better than the people they have on campus now to push that too deep to make everybody better, and that's what Georgia's going to do.
And by the way, this whole thing that Javon Dexter was somehow shutting down his recruitment, how's that worked out for you so far for the Gators? Maybe not quite so good on that. All right, let me, as Jeff does whatever he's doing, let me show you some of the guys that just missed out on being on our top 10. Actually, smaller list here. We're really kind of whittling this down, but I do see a new name there, and it's kind of interesting. That's a 2020 running back. Jacoby Cowan, the defensive line, we've talked about him. Jay Hardy, another defensive line we talked about now for a while. Arian Smith's been here for a while. Avante Williams, the Oregon commit's been here for a while. Nadab Joseph, obviously a former UGA signee. We've addressed him before. But Ashad Johnson is a guy that we've not talked about in this program. I know there was some Twitter stuff involving Johnson recently. What can you tell us about this? Why is Georgia even in communication with another 2020 running back at the moment?
So Johnson, that name needs another A, actually. It's Ashad Johnson, A-S-H-A-A-D, but nation's number 11 running back, Brandon, and I know that's like, oh my Lord, that's like going to the 30 yards off the fairway for Georgia with running back recruiting, but it's about 6 foot, about 200 pounds. He's always wanted to play with Cedric Van Pran. He's at Warren Easton in New Orleans as well. I'm just going to be kind of clear with this one. For Johnson to be in this class, a lot of things would have had to happen with the top targets and the board, and it's crazy to think that because this is a nation's number 11 running back, still a top 200 player in the country.
Yeah.
My thinking about him and his size and his skills, pretty good player, very good player. Is he big enough for Georgia? Is he that big back? Is he that quick back? Obviously, all roads for Georgia at running back recruiting would lead to Evans, but then there's a worst case floor scenario where Evans goes somewhere else and then Lloyd doesn't want to flip or he goes back to Maryland or Penn State. Tank Bigsby, I think, is going to be an Auburn Tiger. Georgia's got to kind of protect itself in the class with just taking care of all possible complicated situations. And I think Johnson's a name to just kind of file away in the back. And, Brandon, it's all about still trying to not make it look as much like the Clark County phone book as you thought that other top targets or other names considered was going.
Fair enough. It's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. That's Jeff Sintel. My name's Brandon Adams. And speaking of Kroger, with Kroger, you can make Labor Day Flavor Day. You can save on everything you need. How about this? New York strip loin, only $5.99 a pound when you use your Kroger card. Also big savings on Coke products, hot dogs, and those like drumstick popsicles. My kids love these. Maybe your kids do as well. You can get all of that at your local Kroger as you get ready for a big Labor Day weekend celebration coming up next weekend with the start of the college football season as well. And by the way, you can do some of this shopping tomorrow night too when we do our Kroger Kickoff live from the Kroger Marketplace incoming. Can't wait to see you there, the Bethel Review Road location, starting at 6 p.m. tomorrow for the Kroger Kickoff. All right, we're going to do trivia here in just a moment. We'll have some fun with that. But Jeff mentioned Cedric Van Pran Granger, the most recent UGA commit. Let me let you hear a little bit of a conversation that Van Pran had with Jeff Sintel about his commitment in terms of when it was that he knew he wanted to commit to Georgia. Well, ironically, it's a little bit similar to what Amarius Mims talked about a little earlier about some fun he had in Athens this past summer. Van Pran Granger also kind of singing a little bit of a similar song. Here is a little bit of Cedric with Jeff on that topic.
I keep talking about this, but I think when I recently just went to UGA when they had the slip slides and stuff, and Coach Smart, he got on with the recruits, and he had on like a polo and some cargo shorts. So I think that really just stood out to me just because he was wanting to get down and have fun with his players. And, he wasn't even dressed for the occasion, but he just went with it, just to show that, he loves us and, he wants to have a little fun with us. So I really appreciated that.
It's kind of interesting. That's a video we've all seen. I think Richard LeCount was the first one to share that. Kirby did have his coaching shirt on, collared shirt, with the shorts and the socks. He goes sliding down there, and you know, what I've said about Kirby in these moments, Jeff, is he's very natural in those environments. This isn't Nick Saban pulling a boat in a pair of pleated shorts and a sweater vest, something that looks totally contrived and completely forced. You know, Kirby is very natural and comfortable with recruits. The video that wasn't intentionally shared, that LeCount just shared on his own, happened to show Kirby, but that kind of private, relaxed moment made a big impact on Cedric Van Pran Granger. Marius Mims talked about it. Kirby's just good at that kind of thing.
You know, when Richie is like that, like the tweet went something like, "For all y'all folks that are having a bad day, here's Kirby Smart on a slip and slide." That's exactly the way Richie is. That's the way LeCount is. He is just that type of funny, that energetic, that, you know, what was that term in the Richt era? That energy vampire?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, LeCount is an energy rainmaker. He just brings sunshine.
That's a really good way to say that.
Happiness. I mean, the kid just smiles all the time, and he's a guy who walks into the room and you're like, this fella's got something to say, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say. And I think, folks, that recruiting trip where Kirby's getting down on the slip and slide, everybody talks about the scavenger hunt and things that really Georgia does well in recruiting. Just wait, folks. And even that West End reveal, that was great a year ago. I'd probably put a Coca-Cola on it that the cookout of 2019 produces more fireworks than the reveal of 2018.
Well, speaking of funny and big personalities, Georgia offensive line coach Sam Pittman is also one of those. What was Pittman's reaction? We saw the Twitter reaction. How about the private reaction to getting the commitment from Cedric? He talked about that a bit too. Take a listen to this.
Coach Pitt was ecstatic, man. Coach Pitt has been wanting me to commit and try to take that spot since he offered me. Coach Pitt has always believed in me and my athletic abilities and also my mental abilities, capabilities, should I say. So he's always wanted me on board, and I'm just really happy that, you know, a guy that has been showing me love since day one, I get to play for him, and I think he's a really awesome coach. So he was really excited, and I'm really excited.
It's one of the biggest sure things we have in the recruiting world of college football right now. The ability of Pittman to really forge a strong bond and the lead offensive line recruit. What you hear there from Cedric is the kind of thing that you've heard from so many prospects in recent years, and what you're already starting to hear a lot of examples with the 2021 class as well.
I'll be honest, folks, it sounds like a broken record at times. It sounds like, hold on, who said that? Who said that before? I mean, if I was to put together what Andrew Thomas was saying in 2016 with what Clay Webb was saying in 2017, with what Jamari Salyer was saying in 2017, with what Warren McClendon was saying in 2018, Xavier Truss in 2018. It almost sounds like the same. It's like sequels to the same movie every stinking year when you cover Georgia recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely about that. We're going to do trivia here with Jeff in just a moment as part of our weekly six-pack. Before that, let me remind you, you can earn 4 times the fuel points on gift card purchases between August 30th and September 2nd. So that's coming up soon. A big chance for you to save. You can do that at your local Kroger, so make sure you check that out. All right, Jeff, a weekly six-pack, your chance to stump me with questions, stump the audience. We'll have a good time with that, and we'll cede the floor to you to do just that.
By the way, folks, I'll give you some quick intel. The phone call that I received, and I didn't put it on silent before a broadcast, it did not originate from the state of Texas or Houston, Texas.
So no Houston area code on that. So thanks for the update on that, but we appreciate the information as always.
Okay, we've got one more week of just grinding it out with these six-pack trivias until we get into game week, and game week is when we really have fun and we educate you guys about what's going down with that opponent so you can sound like the smartest dog at the tailgate or the smartest fan at the tailgate each week, or even on the drive up either to Athenstown or to the enemy territories. Number one, true or false, Brandon? I think a lot of folks might get this one. Georgia hasn't had a receiver with more than 103 yards in a single game since September of 2016.
September of 2016 is interesting. There were, some big performances. You think about McKenzie on the road at Missouri relatively early in that year. Obviously, Javon Wims has a big 2017 scoring touchdowns. He did have 720 yards receiving. Most of that, though, happened like Florida game late, and then he got hurt there at the very end of the year. Chadwick Ivory says false. I think there's a chance that's true.
What is inner Brandon telling you right now? What is your inner offensive coordinator on this topic?
Listen, I've told you before that Georgia's got to get better with its wide receiver play. It's got to have bigger passing, receiving performances from its receivers if it wants to win a national championship. And whatever the number is, it's below the standard of what has been the typical national champion as of late. I think there's a chance this is true, but if it is true, it just accentuates that point even further.
Well, I mean, here's what I'll say before we get to the answer. Riley really was a great player, drafted high, a prototype wide receiver, basically did everything that Georgia asked of him. The issue here is that Riley really wasn't the way Georgia wins football games. If you look, he's gone to the NFL. Georgia would dearly miss him, sure would love to have him in this rotation. I'm sure most of the coaching staff would say that. But he only had one game of his career where he had caught more than 62 yards worth of balls, and that was 87 yards against Missouri. He never had a 100-yard game for Georgia. And this is the way Georgia wins games, especially under Jim Chaney. They don't take advantage of NFL receivers, at least in terms of the production and yardage or any sort of those big-time NCAA or SEC stat leader totals. And
Georgia does play more receivers more often than some teams do. It rotates 2 or 3 receivers on virtually every play.
Yeah, and part of that's the blocking, part of that's the run game, part of that's just Georgia depth, giving everybody reps and want everybody to be on the field very fresh. What this means about this first trivia question, I'll just cut right to the chase. The answer is true. Georgia hasn't had a receiver with more than 103
We were about
yards.
evenly split on that, but more people than not said true. And Brian McPhail included gets it right on YouTube. And it's just an example to me of an area in which Georgia's got to be better. There's nothing wrong with having a tendency, favoring a big offensive line, big running backs. But in terms of winning the national championship, you can't just be right-handed. You got to be right-handed and left-handed too. And you're going to have to add that extra dimension. This could be the year where that happens. Certainly, as I talked about on Dog Nation Daily today, there's growing optimism for Demetrius Robertson with good reason, but you can't settle for being only a team that runs the ball. You're not going to win the national championship that way.
Yeah, I would say, here's what I think. I would look for Demetrius to do a lot of the things that Mecole did last year for this offense. I don't think he's the 1,200-yard receiver that Brandon's looking for in this offense. But
no, I don't need 1,200 yards, but I can't have the leading receiver be 550 yards.
Yeah, and to me, it's a little bit of semantics here. Does Fromm need to throw for about 225 yards a game? Maybe, probably so, especially in an SEC game. I think the bigger thing is, those advanced statistics like yards per attempt and downfield throws and
he needs
how
to
well.
get to double digits in yards per attempt. He needs to find a way to turn 9 into 10. That'd be a huge change for Georgia.
And I think the other thing to think about is if Georgia's leading receiver has 70 yards a game, that's fine, because then you'll end up with 900 yards on the year, especially during the regular season. Just something to think about. I don't ever see Georgia having a guy that pulls in 130 yards per game or 130 yards against the big games.
And in most of your opponents, you don't need that. It's just the few that matter the most. November, certainly December on, where that's when you have to have the passing game firing on all cylinders. Question number 2?
Number 2. Which Georgia Bulldog had the most catches in a single game last season?
Good question.
Riley Ridley, not there anymore. Isaac Nada, DeAndre Swift, Mecole Hardman, and Terry Godwin.
So here's my assumption. I'm going to assume this is not one of the 3 wide receivers on this. Nada had a better year than you realize. He had more than 400 yards receiving. Swift is actually the leading returning receiver for Georgia right now. So while it may be kind of somewhat counterintuitive, I think the answer is either B, Nada, or C, Swift. And I'm going to say Nada, even though we bang on Georgia for not throwing the tight ends. In terms of total catches for a game, I believe that Nada is your answer here. Green Soldier also agrees with me. He says it's either Swift or Nada. Brian McPhail, though, does say Hardman. Jimmy Hoskins on YouTube says Nada. Rita and Dana Brookshire say Nada. Christopher White also says Mecole. Chris McGee says Ridley. So kind of a smattering of opinions, but a few folks backing me on Nada. I'm going to go with the tight end here. Remember, there were stretches in a couple games where towards the end of the first half when Georgia felt comfortable going hurry up because they didn't have to worry about stamina for the offensive line, there'd be plays in drives where Nada would catch 3 catches in a row.
Florida game.
Yeah, Florida game is an example of that. I believe there's another one where he caught 3 in a row as well. So I think Nada's that guy.
So Dog Nation YouTube viewers, Twitter viewers, and Facebook viewers, you're following Brandon Adams' block on this one, and what do you get for that?
No, Swift. All right, so that was the other guy. 6 catches against Alabama in the SEC championship game. So as we said before, that would have been the other choice I would have made there. So there you go.
Interesting how Georgia used Swift against a premium opponent. They fed him for more catches in one game than any other receiver had the entire year, and obviously that was a lot of Fromm check downs to what Alabama was allowing Georgia to get in their defensive scheme.
Question number 3.
Number 3, going to get a little tricky with these next few, Brandon.
Demetrius Eisen, by the way, upset with me for leading folks down the wrong road with Nada.
He doesn't like to talk about the tight ends. Which one of these returning Bulldogs started the fewest games in 2000?
Fewest starts.
Fewest starts.
This one is a trick question. I have one piece of knowledge as to why this is a trick question.
A, DeAndre Swift. B, Tyler Simmons. C, Tyreek McGee. D, Cade Mays. Or E, Walter Grant.
All right, so Mays started more games than you realize, first of all. You got to keep that in mind. Swift started fewer games than you think if the definition of start is who is standing on the field for the first play.
That's what start is.
Yeah, if that's the way you're going to define start, Swift did not start as many as you think. Mays started more than you think. The McGee-Grant thing is kind of interesting because if Grant was off, McGee would be on, meaning, if you're in a nickel situation. I'm going to say it's Swift. I'm going to say Swift started the fewest games.
Started the fewest games. And again, let's look at this question closely, guys.
Joel Moody says Grant. Frank Crowder says Tyler Simmons. Richard Pollard says Swift or Grant. John Prem Williams says McGee. McGee was a star a lot last year, though. You got to remember that. Getting some Grants here. David Gross says Holyfield always started. Listen, that's my memory of this as well. So I'm going to stick with David Gross on this and say it's Holyfield first snap of the game frequently, which means that that Swift actually started less than a lot of folks probably realize.
Yeah, it kind of shudders to think about how talented at back Swift is, and he's not starting every game for Georgia.
I also think that the word start in the modern parlance of college football it's kind of passé just because of the way that, things just change very quickly. Defensive formations, extra defensive back. When you look at the idea of a 3-receiver set or a 2-receiver set, I mean, there's so much wholesale changes at most positions. The idea of what a starter even is has kind of the definition of that, I think, has kind of evolved.
And what we try to do with a lot of these questions is to educate, because a lot of people see a lot of those names out there, and I wanted people to learn something that a lot of these guys started more games for Georgia than you might think.
Yeah, Mays got like 6 starts last year, something crazy like that, which I have no memory of. I mean, I have some memory of it, but not being that many starts. He actually started way more games.
Well, Mays started a lot of games in one game specifically in replacing Andrew Thomas, and then another series of games he started replacing Ben Cleveland.
Yeah, he started way more than you might have remembered.
So I'm going to give you this. We're going to do this a little different. I'm going to tell you that Swift started just 5 games last year. Mm-hmm. And do you think, Brandon, that everyone else started more than that than Swift's 5 games last year?
I think they did, actually. I mean, am I remembering correctly? Didn't Mays get some starts more than people realize?
Got a lot of starts. And folks, if you followed Brandon's block on this one, you're running to daylight right here because Brandon Adams just nailed that question.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Did we get a bell for that? Did everybody get a bell for that? Did he get a victory bell for that? Answer Swift. He only started in 5. So that's a benchmark to go to our next question.
Right,
question 4. Which one of these returning Bulldogs started the most games in 2018?
Good question.
You have some holdovers here. Simmons, McGee, Mays, Rice, Grant. So right away you know that all these guys had at least 5 starts last year.
So is this most of this group or most of anybody?
The most of this group.
Most of this group.
Because obviously Fromm and Reed started every game last year.
I mean, Rice is obviously a clear starter. He did miss some games at the end, so keep that in mind. Simmons on the field a lot seems like a strong possibility. McGee on the field a lot. Georgia's in nickel a bunch. Whew. This is a tough one. I'm going to go Simmons. Am I?
Are you going Simmons? Are you going to make that throw? Is that your read?
Simmons or Grant's where I want to go. Todd Greer says Simmons. Dante Rivers says Cade Mays. It would be kind of a tricky question for it to be Mays because we don't think of him as a returning starter. Actually, that may have Chris McGee says Mays as well. Timothy Burrell says Rice. Honestly, Jeff may be trying to trick us on this one. Let me say Cade Mays, just from the idea that maybe Jeff's trying to trick us. I'm going to change my answer and go with Mays because, as I said before, I would not have remembered this had I not been reading this the other day for some other project that I was working on. Mays started more than you think. I'm going to say the answer to the question is Mays.
First off, I want to send some love out to YouTube. Maybe we can get some thumbs up on YouTube if we've had a good rep so far in the six-pack. Brandon Alvin gives it a D. GB2 says D. Jarek Lawson says Walter Grant. Marquise Majors says Tyreek McGee. You got Alvin and GB2 going Monty Rice there. Dallas Schwartz says Tyreek McGee. Jimmy Hoskins says Monty Rice. Brandon Alvin says D. Monty Rice. Lloyd Dog says Grant. And you know what? Lloyd Dog, you got that question
All right, nice
Lloyd
job.
Dog.
Walter Grant.
Walter Grant, answer. Walter had 8 starts.
Okay.
Look at this. Mays and McGee both had 7 starts respectively.
Boy, 7 is that would not be what I would remember for Cade Mays.
Simmons finished with 6 starts. And Monty Rice, remember those injuries? He actually only had 5 starts.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, Rice to me is a clear starter, but he did battle with some injuries. By the way, Matt Talley says, "Why do they read the guesses?" I like to make people feel like they're a part of it.
Exactly. It's all camaraderie here, guys. It's like, Southern Baptist Church. Everybody wants to call on everybody to lead a song or something like that, right?
We'll move on in your hymnal to the next question then.
Moving right along, we've got this one dog-eared. Which one of these returning Bulldogs had the most tackles for losses last season?
Of this group.
A, Malik Herring. B, Channing Tindall. C, Tay Crowder. D, Tyler Clark. Or E, Adam Anderson. I'll even give you some clarity on this, Brandon. The name here that wins this category is actually the leading returning tackler in tackles for losses for Georgia last season.
And I actually do know the answer to this. It's Tay Crowder, and it's not what I would have guessed. But I do happen to know this is Crowder.
Brandon been doing a little research on the defensive backfield.
I've been doing some work here. Every now and then I do some real work, but the answer to this question is Tay Crowder. And Richard Pollard does get the right answer as well, so does Timothy Burrell too. It's not what you would have thought. I want to say he had like 5 tackles for loss a season ago.
6 tackles for
6
loss.
tackles for loss a season ago. I think you had.
Herring was on there. Tyndall was on there.
Yeah, but the answer is Tay Crowder.
Tay Crowder. C. Brandon gets a bell there. Tay Crowder is the top returnee in that category from 2018 with 6 tackles for losses.
Memory serves, I believe that Georgia brings back 20 players from a year ago that had tackles for loss.
Yeah, but none of them are really good. I mean,
they're all low totals, but
non-havoc year. We're gonna look back at that as the non-havoc.
But what
year.
I said though is, and I wrote this the other day for DogNation.com. What if each of those guys only had 2? What if that 2 finds a way to turn into 3? What if Crowder 6 becomes 7? Really, that's the way that you improve your havoc. It's not somebody breaking through the way that Josh Allen did for Kentucky last year, although Georgia fans would certainly take it. It's for everybody who contributed some last year to find a way to contribute more. All of a sudden, you've really changed your total at that point.
Well, I think here's what has to happen. It has to be an Azeez Ojulari or some sort of combination of Nolan Smith and Jermaine Johnson. That, first of all, you got to replace DeAndre Walker's tackles for losses because he was the leader on the team last year. He actually had 6.5 sacks. So somebody's got to replace those numbers. But I mean, I think Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning would be feeling quite dandy if a couple of those names get around 8, 9, 10 tackles for losses.
It'd be great to see. How about the next question?
Number 6. I'm the top returning punt returner on the Georgia team. Check the stats from last season. Who am I?
This is a good question.
Everybody, one story people are on the beat are not writing yet are who the kick returner and who the punt returner is going to be, because I think that's still undiscovered country for the program right now.
I think they've tried a lot of different guys at that spot. Is it Cook? Did he get to return some punts last year? Am I wanting to say that? Surely it wasn't DeAndre Swift. That would seem weird. Kearis Jackson, I think he's in the mix for one of those roles this year. Was he doing some of that kind of stuff? I'm going to say it's either Jackson or Cook. And I'll go, actually, let me go Kearis Jackson. Kearis Jackson and some mop-up duty.
You think some mop-up duty against Carolina or
something like that?
Tennessee or Southern?
Let me say Kearis.
Middle Tennessee.
I almost want to say Cook. Let me see Kearis instead. Brian McPhail does say James Cook. The risk of
Brandon ends this thing with a buzz, and normally that's a bad thing or a good thing, but Brandon ends this with a buzz. The correct answer there, guys. Stokes. 1 punt last season. Stokes returned 1 punt.
I would say that Cook, I would have thought that maybe Cook or Kearis got a, like you said, a mop-up punt return at some point in time. I definitely think that Kearis for sure, Cook almost, certainly. they're definitely in the mix. I mean, you got Brian Herring returning kickoffs; he's done that before. But you're gonna have some of those other guys in that mix do that there as well.
You think D-Rob and Herring are the kick returners against Vanderbilt?
If I had to guess, I would say that D-Rob is the guy that lines up next to Herring there.
Who would you say is the punt returner?
I think it'd be really fun if it was James Cook. I guess I don't know yet, although I think that Kira's probably in the mix for that too.
What about D-Rob for the punt returner?
I wonder.
It'd be interesting.
It'd be exciting for sure. What
Guys, weigh in on that. Who do you think should be the punt returner and the kick returners on that?
What do you say we put 5 minutes on the clock? You can weigh in on that, anything you want to, and we're done. We'll give away a Kroger $50 How About Them Groceries gift card here today there as well. Anything you want to. You said so. It's time for that crowbar. Yeah, listen, we're gonna hang out here long enough. We'll just go straight to the Kroger bar at some point in time for sure. Beef 73 says, how about Jordan Davis as a punt returner? I wouldn't mind seeing that. Devin Glenn says Cook or D-Rob. Am I right to say they'd be the two most exciting guys? You couldn't have anybody more exciting. Now, Blaylock's in this mix too, obviously. Maybe not first game, but he's in this mix too. To me, Blaylock aside, because we haven't seen him yet, Cook or D-Rob would be the two most exciting potential answers.
Two names. One of them I don't think is even in contention for that yet because they've got other plans for him this year. Tyreek Stevenson is a phenomenal athlete in space.
He's very fast.
Everybody wants to see. Here's the name everybody wants to see back there, but he's just too important for the rest of the team in the offense, and that's DeAndre Swift. Can you imagine DeAndre Swift returning punts?
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to watch. I don't think you can do it. I also think that Robertson's on the field a bunch as the slot guy, which maybe means that you're looking for a way to get touches to other guys. Chance Darlington also talking about D-Rob and Cook there in that role. Mike Riley says, what about Zamir White as a punt returner?
Oh, my Lord.
He just absolutely, you talk about some gunner coming up trying to hit him. He just lowered his shoulder and put that guy into the stands. Chesh Bryan says, what's up with Tommy Bush? You know, I think that Bush is in competition right now, but I don't think that he is likely, at least at the beginning of the season, to crack the top 6 for Georgia. And those are the ones that are going to matter the most. Heard some good things about Bush in terms of maybe even catching a touchdown in the first scrimmage. But I don't know that we're talking about Bush overtaking a Cager or a Landers. Those feel like the kinds of guys he's competing with right now. My assumption is, for now, those two names at least are ahead of him.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to get through. For Tommy Bush to catch big balls for Georgia in 2019, he's got to get above Cager. He's got to get above Landers. He's got to get above Pickens. And he's got to get above Simmons. I think the one story, maybe the beat, is probably going to turn its attention to pretty closely. Folks, Matt Landers is right in this thing. And if that light bulb is an LED light and that thing is all the way on like the LED lights at Sanford Stadium, the Georgia offense just got a lot more potent.
Yeah, it's important to remember, you know, what J.J. Holloman did in 2018 compared to what he did in 2017. There was really nothing, with the exception of G-Day, in 2017 from Holloman that would have predicted his real breakout performances in 2018. Landers could be an example of that, even though he probably had more buzz because he's been on campus longer and he's, you know, kind of an exciting, you know, taller-looking receiver. But a Georgia receiver breaking out without really predicting that in 2018, that's certainly possible because that's exactly what Holloman did the previous year. I still think that Cager-Landers competition's going to be an interesting one, but that's certainly a very fair thing to bring up. Cody Taylor asked at point blank, is Zach Evans committing to Georgia tonight, Jeff?
Maybe he. Whoa. No. Let's just move on to the next question right there. Almost.
Listen, I'm just feeding the questions as they come in.
Probably not at liberty to share that. Right
Dante Edie says, will James Cook have more receiving touchdowns or rushing touchdowns this year?
I think it's about 5 of each.
About 5 of each? You're going to have 10 touchdowns for James Cook?
He had 4 last year. He had 2 last year in mop-up duty.
Boy, y'all got some big-time fantasy stats coming in.
Hold on. Somebody's got to get the ball against Murray State and Arkansas State.
Will Go Dog says, does George Pickens start by season's end? I've already given you my thoughts about what I think about the word starter. Is he one of Georgia's top 4 receivers by the end of the season? I say yes, for sure. May not be Georgia's leading receiver, but in the top trio of receivers, top quartet of receivers, and those are guys that are on the field a lot, I would say Pickens for sure.
Here's what I'll say, and I'll be more definitive here. I'm not going to say catches, but I'm going to say yards or touchdowns. Pickens will definitely be in the top 4 in one of those 2 stat categories for the Bulldogs.
Chip Gromlich says that Trey Blunt's underrated. I completely agree with this.
Talk about him enough.
Yeah. Now, you can't say they're all underrated because at some point in time you got to have some sort of pecking order established. but Blunt's been on the field. When they've thrown the ball, he's caught it. You've heard some good whispers about him coming out of the scrimmages. I do not believe that Blunt's absence of playing time is about him faltering as a player. I think it's more about just the presence of the overall depth that Georgia has that position.
I think you also got to get those young kids a lot of looks in those scrimmages as well, because I think Georgia pretty certain that they know what Trey Blunt can be. And, Trey Blunt's a guy that his only crime is he's an 8 in a lot of the categories. 7.5, 8 in a lot of the categories, where other guys, those really special, incredible guys, have a 9 or 10 in some of those areas.
Henry Carter asking about Otis Reese. Where do you think things stand with Reese? I think the two starters at safety are solidified. Lewis Seen's gotten the buzz. Is that buzz coming at the expense of Reese in your mind?
Otis is probably, I think, developing into a guy that's going to be in a lot of run fits, a lot of goal lines, with the ability to be a big safety in the box and come down in the box. Seen seems like the guy that can do a lot of everything, can play free and strong. And I'd be very interested. And this is not a knock on Otis Reese. It is a exclamation part next to Lewis Seen. If Lewis Seen is not a fan favorite by the middle of the year, and that might be special teams, that might be big hits.
Big hitter.
Might now, folks. When you flip on that film for Lewis Seen for the first time, you might have not even known his name. Might need to know he played for Deion Sanders. Might not have known that his mom is in Haiti, wants to move her over, or he played in Massachusetts his junior year. But you watch that film and you watch the first 3 or 4 plays and you're like, this young man will run the alley and this young man will get there to the football with bad intentions and he will strike you. And every time Kirby Smart has a chance to do some extra coaching on the field or to just throw in all those names at safety, he's bringing Lewis Seen's name in there for a reason.
Henry, it's a great question. We'll make you the winner of our Kroger $50 How About Them Groceries gift card. By the way, speaking of our friends at Kroger, let me remind you this, that beginning Wednesday, August 28th, you can download coupons at Kroger.com or the Kroger app, and you can start redeeming them Friday, August 30th through September 2nd. You can save on items for all your Labor Day cookout, Smithfield bacon, all the condiments you might need, Kingsford charcoal, so much more, and a Betty Crocker cake mix as well for some dessert stuff there. So get on that. You can start redeeming them Friday, August 30th. You can start downloading them Wednesday, August 28th, getting ready for Labor Day. Flavor Day, as we said, at your local Kroger. By the way, speaking of local Krogers, we'll see you tomorrow. Kroger Marketplace incoming for our Kroger kickoff to start the season. Jeff will be there. I'll be there. Connor Riley will be there. Our buddy Mike Griffith will be there. It all gets going at 6 p.m., 5550 Bethel View Road. Thank you all. Heard from so many of you who plan on coming out and see us. We can't wait to see you there. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. Jeff's got you on the forum at forum.dognation.com. and at dognation.com as well. And he'll have an appearance with us on Dog Nation Daily come Friday, too. So we'll talk a lot of recruiting. We'll see you tomorrow. Maybe Jeff will give you some of that inside stuff on Zachary Evans that he doesn't want to say right now. Come out and see us at the Kroger Marketplace tomorrow. Maybe you might get some of that from Jeff. Either way, have a great day. We'll look forward to talking to you again right here on the Dog Nation video channels.